It was almost a year ago, in that wonderful era pre-Covid, that the last overland expedition arrived in Folkestone, having driven overland from Singapore. The marvellous old Series 1 Land Rover and a couple of TD5s, and I recorded this in a video on my channel. And out of the blue, as part of the procession, a new Defender appeared. I thought this was a bit of a cheap publicity stunt. I made the comment at the time that if I was travelling Singapore, I'd far rather take the Series 1 than the new Defender. But was I right? I've had a year to think about it and I've come to a very firm conclusion. Well, I'm here in rural Portugal, doing wild camping once again, next to a beautiful reservoir and everything very peaceful and tranquil. I first came here a couple of weeks ago, but it didn't go so well. You have to drive along an overgrown track to get here, and ow! Ouch! I got hit in the face by a stray branch, gave me a bloody eye, but thankfully no permanent damage. I came back again today and everything went a little bit better. Crossing a mini stream, and there are a number of these on this track. Driving through the scratchy stuff. Would you seriously take your £60,000 new Defender through this? I'm now emerging at the other end near the reservoir. Now, in order to judge what I expect a new Defender to do, let's start off by having a quick look at what I do with this old girl, and that will set the baseline for my expectations. To give you a thumbnail sketch about how I live and what I expect from my vehicle, in the UK I live in the country. I don't need a Defender for that. My day car's a Discovery 1 and that can easily handle all of the fetching and carrying which I need. However, down here in Portugal I own an olive grove and that creates a huge amount of work for me. You see my little encampment here with various trailers and caravans and so forth. I must have done the return trip to the UK about 20 times and each trip is a minimum 5,000 kilometres. However, life isn't just work and no play, and I do travel when I can. So I've done all of Western Europe, Southern Europe, but also going over as far as Romania, the Balkans, Bulgaria, Turkey, the Black Sea, Greece. And also when I can, I travel over the water, so I've been down to Corsica, Sardinia, a couple of times into Morocco. And I've put this in the container just once, earlier this year, took it to Borneo, although that trip was a bit wiped out by the lockdown there. If we didn't have the travel restrictions now, I would be in South America. So I can now draw up the requirements list for what I'm looking for in a vehicle. And firstly, the must-haves. And I've written down reliability, toughness, versatility, easily customizable, by which I mean you can drill holes and bolt things on anywhere you need to. Good off-road performance, mechanical simplicity and easily repairable by non-specialist mechanics, and last but not least, reasonable cost of ownership. You don't want to own a money pit. Now, out of this list, how many does the new Defender meet? Well, from what I read, 1. I think it's got very good off-road performance, at least the equivalent of this, even if it does reach it by a route which I don't approve of. And the second list is the nice to haves. First one is comfort. And yes, the new Defender has that. Far more comfortable than this old bus, and I would really appreciate that. The second one I wrote down was good on-road performance, but actually I hesitate. These days there are so many speed limits and so many speed cameras, you just cannot use good on-road performance. Even in this old girl, every time I drive through France I pick up an average of 2 speeding tickets, and I'm trying to drive as slowly as possible. So for my own good, I'm not going to say good on-road performance. So overall, how does the new Defender match up? Well, for me, it's a total non-starter. I'm not going to attempt to run through the design deficiencies as I see them in the new Defender. It would take too long. But let's look at just 2 aspects which to me typify the problem. Firstly, the Pivi Pro infotainment system. Apparently a wonderful system, feature-laden, award-winning. You can find details on the internet. But let me look at just two parts of this. Firstly, the built-in navigation system. Now the fact is that proprietary navigation systems tend to be absolutely useless when you're going off-road. Either the information's not there or it is there and it's inaccurate. And in my experience, most travellers prefer to do their own thing with their preferred system. So you go down into Africa, Tracks for Africa are very popular. Many travellers use Maps.me all over the world. Personally, I use both Quo Vadis and Aussie Explorer. And when I'm really going off track, I build up my routes ahead of time. And for all of these systems, you need to have either an Android or a Windows device. Proprietary navigation systems, totally irrelevant. And secondly, the use of SIM cards. Now, when you get outside developed areas like the European Union or North America, if you want to remain connected, you have to buy a local SIM card, which is what I do. And I put it into this, which both acts as a phone and also as an Android tablet. And incidentally, it's pretty good Wi-Fi hotspot too. Now, Pivi Pro is a dual SIM system, and it means that if you go into a new country, you're going to be buying and keeping topped up 3 SIM cards. This just is not practical politics. I'm sorry, for me Pivi Pro belongs in an urban Range Rover and has no place in a working and travelling Defender. The second thing I want to talk about is the suspension. Now, Land Rover have gone from the use of live axles on the old Defender to independent suspension all round, with the added complication of active ride height adjustment. Now, Ronnie Dahl on his channels has compared the two systems, so I won't repeat it here. But the biggest single difference is that you get much better articulation with live axles, and your wheels are going to remain connected to the ground over much rougher ground conditions. With independent suspension, you're going to find one wheel flying up in the air, and it's got to be controlled by the use of sensors and electronics. Basically, you're driving a three-wheeler. I don't know, if I wanted to drive a three-wheeler, I'd go out and I'll buy one. Now, I do understand that independent suspension is the better solution for road-going cars, but it's not what we're talking about here. Actually, Land Rover made very good design decisions on their live axles. Firstly, the adoption of coil springs gives much better articulation than with the old-fashioned leaf springs. And secondly, they stuck with fully floating half shafts rather than going with the cheaper and more fragile semi-floating design. I think you'll find that all trucks use fully floating half shafts, and that says it all. I have to say, I just don't understand the thinking of the Land Rover engineers. Why you should wish to go from a simple, reliable, robust design which works very well and go with another design which is inferior, basically in all respects off-road. I just don't understand. And certainly their engineers had a very different engineering training to what I had when I was a young man. My weekend trip is now over, and back to earth with a thud. I'm going back to my land and it's absolutely pouring with rain. You really need a good tough 4x4 which is happy in the rain and the mud, and I'm not sure I'd want to bring an expensive new Defender here. So how the hell did we end up with such a pathetic attempt at a Defender as we traditional Defender owners know it to be? Well, in all companies, the policies are set and the big decisions are taken by the grown-ups in the boardroom. So I thought I'd poke around there. I went to the JLR website and obligingly they list the company directors and they also give mini biographies. Now at this point it gets very interesting and the video takes an unexpected turn. I looked at the biographies and God, what a shambles. Absolutely no consistency to them whatsoever. Some have mugshots, others don't. Some have company logo at the top, others don't. But worse than that, in a number of cases where the company logo is given, the format has been corrupted. And surely this is a bit like allowing your national flag to be defaced. One of the biographies is also written in Spanish rather than English, and the guy isn't a Spaniard, he's a Brit. How the hell could that happen? And finally, they didn't even bother to PDF the files, they just posted the Word files on the internet, and you never do that. Now this is your public image and it's your contact with your potential customers. And I know, as a former business development director myself, you've got to be whiter than white. And finally, I would also say this will have a very corrosive effect on the workforce. They'll see it, their attitude will be, well, if the directors couldn't give a shit, why the hell should we? Now, looking at the biographies, the directors themselves, on the positive side, they're all high-achieving senior auto industry executives, and they come from various backgrounds. The chief executive is ex-Renault, and others come from Ford, from Honda, from Aston Martin, and they've done very well. But taken together, I'd have to say, God, what a grey, colourless bunch they are. The problem is that because they've all got broadly similar backgrounds and experience, you get what's known as groupthink, and it basically means everyone thinks alike. And in a healthy organisation, you need to have a few individuals who come from very different background, have different experience set, who can stand back and say, hang on, let's think about it, are we really doing the right thing? Let's go back to the drawing board and let us reconsider. Now, interestingly, several of the guys give their out-of-work interests. So, for example, one guy likes walking his dogs, another guy interested in anything to do with rugby. I was a bit disappointed. I hope to see something like a guy being passionate about exploration and travel, or maybe mountaineering, or whatever. So I guess these guys will judge the new Defender against what they like doing. And so, for example, the dog walker, he may want to go over to the Peak District with a couple of Labradors, and after a nice long walk, put the muddy animals in the back of the vehicle, and when he gets home, to be able to wash out the back of the vehicle. And you can do that with a new Defender, or at least if you spent £500 on the pet accessory pack, which gives you a rubber mat. And I guess the rugby dude, he might enjoy driving up to London with a car full of burly rugby playing friends to watch England at Twickenham. You need a nice big boot so you can have the picnic at the tailgate, and then you go inside the stadium to your debenture seats to watch the game. And again, the Defender, absolutely ideal for that. But I have to say, in my opinion, God, how middle class can you get? How petit bourgeois. So what do these guys actually know about the activities of the traditional Defender owner? Do they know about having to do hard physical work and needing a vehicle to support you? Do they know about doing serious overland travel? About living out of the vehicle? And such subjects as off-grid hygiene, shower, toilet. I very much doubt it, and I think they would in fact be disgusted if you even tried to talk to them about it. Now, to try to put this into perspective, I think it'd be fair to say that the senior management at Land Rover, they belong to the urban elite. And the problem we have in the UK, as in many parts of the world, is that the urban elite call the shots and they take all of the decisions. They are what I call the we know besters. Now, when the new Defender was being spec'd up in the early days, the best of my knowledge, there was no real attempt made to consult the views of existing vehicle owners. Indeed, I know the editor of one of the dedicated Land Rover magazines in the UK, and he tried to engage in a dialogue with the design team to put the views of his readers, and to the best of my knowledge, he never succeeded. All he could do was to publish open letters in the magazine to the Land Rover management, and they clearly didn't seem to take any notice of that. My take on it is that the Land Rover management, they've simply designed the vehicle which suits themselves. And when some of the decisions were being taken, things like the decision to include Deezer and Spotify in the infotainment system, I think they were listening to the whining of their millennial offspring rather than to existing owners. I always found this slogan, "One life, live it," very inspirational. I think it's fair assumption that that wasn't penned by any of the action heroes who are currently serving on the Land Rover board. Now, history has shown that companies which ignore their customers, they tend to fail. Very worst example of this was Ratner's in the 1980s. Look it up on the internet if you don't know the story. And I'm afraid to say, I think that is exactly where Land Rover are today. And my final message to the management at Land Rover, I think you're doing a fantastic job. You've destroyed a British icon. You've alienated tens of thousands of dedicated, loyal customers. You've attracted ridicule on the internet because of the appalling reliability of the vehicles you produce. And by the way, in recent years, you've been losing literally billions of pounds. Well done indeed.